Okay, welcome back to the Environment and Transportation Committee. I am going to take Delegate Sample Hughes first. That's House Bill 384, and then we'll take the rest of the bills in numerical order, which means 116, 322, 352, 367, and we'll conclude with 399. And with that, Delegate, you have 4 minutes, and the way it'll appear on your timer is it'll cycle through the 2 minutes twice. So go ahead, Delegate Sample Hughes.
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you, Chairman Barvey and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. I am pleased to sponsor House Bill 384, as this is my first hearing in this committee for the session. But I just wanted to bring your attention to this bill that, in matter of fact, you may hear the familiarity with it because for the past 3 years, I have fought tirelessly to ensure that the citizens within my district that reside in mobile homes have their voices heard. It was some time ago when a Florida-based company came in and tried to do their harm by way of increasing the rents in that mobile home park community without any notification and without any preparation for any of the citizens by way of trying to sell that property. As a result, I sponsored a legislation that will require a mobile home park owner to provide notice of the sale to the residents within 5 days after entering into a contract, either by hand delivery or certified mail. We have since realized that 5 days was not sufficient. This bill would extend the notice requirement to 30 days. This change is small, but it is essential for protecting the vulnerable populations that live in mobile housing. There are approximately over 35,000 families living in manufactured home communities, and it is necessary to provide proper, fair rights to them and allow them to have proper notification. And we must do this in real time, and hence the change for the notification from 5 to 30 days. So this bill received a favorable vote in the committee last year and it passed unanimously, but since it was shortened time for the session due to the pandemic, the Senate hearing was canceled and we weren't able to move favorably on that throughout the General Assembly. So to that end, I asked for a favorable support on House Bill 384 today so we can continue to ensure fair practices remain in place for all of our Maryland residents. Thank you, Chairman. That concludes my testimony.
So thank you very much, Delegate. So to be clear, this bill is in exactly the same form it was in when it passed last year, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, any questions for this sponsor who has a bill that has no opposition? Okay, apparently the mind reading skills of the members of the committee are now fully in place. Thank you very much, Delegate.
Sure.
Stop it. Okay, no questions. You're free to go. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is House Bill 116, Delegate Polakovich-Carr. Julie, welcome to the committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. So for the record, I'm Delegate Julie Polakovich-Carr, here to present House Bill 116. This legislation would expand public transit between Frederick and Montgomery counties into Northern Virginia. And I think, as we're all aware, this is a very populous part of the state and of the greater metropolitan DC area. In fact, the I-270 corridor in Maryland is home to the second, third, and fourth largest cities in the state. Because of that, and because of the number of job centers in this region, there is a lot of traffic from commuters going from Maryland to Virginia and vice versa. So the bill that's before you did pass this committee in the House unanimously last session and did run out of time in the Senate. But in spite of that, well, first of all, I want to thank you all for your support. But in spite of the bill not making it across the finish line, I think we actually can claim a win on this one. Just 2 weeks ago, MDOT jointly with Virginia released a draft analysis of commuter buses on the I-270 corridor between the two jurisdictions. And the great news is that analysis actually did identify, as this bill directs, that commuter buses would be a viable option between the two states, and that there would be sufficient ridership to actually set up 8 new commuter bus routes. And even better news is that one of these routes could be set up without any new managed lanes being added on the highways in this area. So in light of this very recent analysis that came out long after Senator Young and I had pre-filed this legislation, we are offering an amendment that in essence strikes the bill and instead directs MDOT to get going with implementing the first of these commuter bus routes that they've identified as being a viable route. Virginia has already said publicly that they have funding that is available and committed to transit projects like this one. Maryland has not made a similar commitment, but I'm hoping with this amended piece of legislation that could be the case. So I think there are a few folks who are signed up to testify and will speak about the amended language, but I will note that we do have a number of pieces of written testimony in the record in support of the amended language, including all of the local governments in the region, Montgomery County, Frederick County, the municipalities of Frederick, Gaithersburg, and Rockville, as well as the Coalition for Smarter Growth, Do the Most Good, and the Maryland Legislative Coalition. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Delegate. Thank you. Any questions for the sponsor before we go to the two people who are going to testify in favor of the bill? Questions? Okay, seeing none, Julie, you're free to go. Oh, well, you can hang around, of course, but the two people who are signed up in favor of offering testimony are Brian Ditzler and Joe McAndrew in that order. So let me call up Brian first. Mr. Ditzler, are you there? Is Brian Ditzler around? Okay, we'll go to Joe McAndrew. Joe, welcome to the Environment and Transportation Committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Barve, Vice Chair Stein, and Delegate Palakovich-Carr. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify in support of HB 116. For many of the reasons that the delegate listed, we are supportive. This is a key effort to making sure that we've got an equitable, sustainable transportation system. Right now, there is no transit option on the 270 corridor connecting to Northern Virginia, and we're at the Greater Washington Partnership. Sorry, I'm the vice president for transportation at the Greater Washington Partnership, a civic alliance of the leading CEOs and entrepreneurs stretching from Baltimore to Richmond. We need to unlock the ability for people to move freely along the 270 corridor into Virginia and vice versa. There is great work being done by MTA and DRPT, and this bill would support that endeavor. And show the support from the state General Assembly for moving forward with this effort and making sure that folks can get to jobs and get to destinations in both jurisdictions. It's a key component. It should be a key component, as you will see from our written public comments on the traffic relief plan for 270 and 495, transit being a key component. And I think that this bill would reinforce and support that activity. And with that, I'll yield back my time, but we support at the Greater Washington Partnership this endeavor. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Joe McAndrew? Well, wait a minute. First of all, is Brian Ditzler there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Brian, why don't you go ahead, and then Charles will take your questions and everybody else's questions. Go ahead, Brian.
Great. My name is Brian Ditzler, and I'm the Transportation Chair and a volunteer with Sierra Club, Maryland. We strongly support the amended version of this bill, HB 116, because there's a great need for a more comprehensive transit system in Montgomery County along the I-270 corridor, including commuter buses between Shady Grove Metro Station in Rockville and Tysons in Northern Virginia. Why a transit line versus expanding I-270 and 495 as the governor has proposed? Transportation is now the primary contributor to climate damaging greenhouse gas and other health damaging emissions in our state and in our country. Most of that pollution comes from vehicle tailpipes, so getting people out of their cars and onto transit would be beneficial for our environment, for people's health, and to reduce traffic congestion too. Transit also serves residents needing to get to and from work who don't own a car. And studies I've seen have shown that number ranges anywhere from 30% to much higher than that. MDOT and VDOT are committed to allowing transit to travel for free on toll lanes if the P3 funded highway expansion occurs on I-270, the Capital Beltway in Northern Virginia. That's welcome news, but we in Sierra Club believe that a full implementation of transit alternatives identified in the recent transit study would actually reduce the congestion on 274-95 across the Cabot John Bridge sufficiently to actually eliminate the need to expand those roads. In summary, there is a need for commuter bus service running between Rockville, Maryland, and Tysons in Northern Virginia. Having MTA offer such a service not only would meet residents' needs, it would lessen air pollution and reduce road congestion too. We urge the committee to issue a favorable report on this legislation.
Thank you. Questions for the witnesses. Charles, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern is, well, I appreciate the thought, and I think it's a good proposal. But is there estimates on the cost recovery of this, or what the fare box recovery would be on this project?
Who'd like to take a crack at
This is Brian from Sierra Club. According to the study just has the transit study that was referred to. It does not have a dollar figure. It talks about different levels of implementation, but unfortunately, that's one of the deficiencies of the study. It does not put dollar figures on it.
Okay, 50% cost recovery, I'd be all for it, but 5% I would not. So thank you.
Any further questions for either of these witnesses? I have a question. It's sort of general, relating to bus transit on highways. Maybe Joe, you might have a better understanding of this. What holds people back from using buses to get between Maryland and Virginia? What I remember when I was a teenager, I used to drive my father to a commuter bus, which took him into DC to his job at the Veterans Administration. So he had me as his free Uber service back in the mid 1970s. What's holding people? What causes people to think twice about using a bus?
First, Chairman, you were a trendsetter well before Uber and Lyft came about.
I didn't get paid.
I think that there's two fundamental challenges or opportunities. One, you need to have a reliable service, and two, you need to have a frequency that is competitive, so that folks can feel comfortable leaving their car at home and know that they can come miss a bus and still make it home if needed. So I think one of the challenges that you have right now with the connection from Maryland into Virginia or the other direction is that, well, one, there's no service, so you have no frequency today, so you can't take it. But two, I think more importantly, the reliability on that segment of road is unreliable. And would be unreliable if we didn't do anything at all. I think that there's enough commuter demand in terms of people waking up in one jurisdiction and going to work in the other, that you could see a decent demand for the bus, but it's not going to be reliable unless we figure out how to prioritize the bus's movement on that roadway, which is really important. So how we do that, Virginia has shown us a few viable options, primarily if you look at 395 or 66, you've got a toll facility that buses move freely on, and Virginia takes the revenue from the tolls and invests it back in bus service. So along 66, many of the bus operations that are there are subsidized, or new bus services have been created in the last few years with those revenues. So it's a question of prioritizing the investment, returning it towards services, and making sure that you've got a reliable, frequent enough service that can go ahead and attract the ridership that's needed.
Thanks. And Brian, since I know the Sierra Club's concerned about congestion on I-270, have you guys taken a position yet on the monorail proposal? You're muted.
No, we've not taken a position on that.
Okay, asked and answered. Any further questions for these two witnesses before we move on to the next bill?
Delegate Parrott has a question.
Thanks.
Oh, Neil, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a question going back to Delegate Otto's question about fare box recovery. Since we are going to vote on this bill and the bill is going to change, so we're going to encourage MDOT to actually move forward with the proposal, is there a way that we can get that before we would take that vote.
Would like to take a crack at that? Nobody, apparently. We'll try and get you that information, Delegate Parrott. Delegate Weigel has his hand up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You brought it up. I was going to ask the question. I know they haven't taken a position, but what is the status of the monorail system? Does that have any feasibility at all? Is it being studied by anyone? Or?
Yeah, MDOT is doing a study, I understand.
And so when will that be completed? Do we know?
No, unfortunately, Kumar the Magnificent has no idea when that's going to happen.
You've got the wrong hat on.
That's right. I left my turban back in Rockville. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Related to the question of fare box recovery, isn't it true that there are financial benefits, economic benefits beyond, that would offset the cost of, any the bus route?
Who would like to take a crack at that?
This is Brian from Sierra Club. Yes, very much so. I mean, highways are subsidized with the revenue from a gas tax and so on. Transit, there's fewer people on the road. There's less congestion. The health of the populace riding transit is well, let me put it a different way. By less pollution generated by car emissions because of transit riding, the public's health is improved. Putting a dollar value on that, I wouldn't begin to do it. But frankly, if everyone wants to drive their car, the roads can't take the congestion. Transit is necessary to relieve the congestion, not to mention to handle that 30% or more population, lower income, who don't own cars.
Okay, sounds like it's asked and answered. Delegate Otto.
I'd just like to ask, we look at where the revenue for the transportation fund comes from. Gas tax and registration of the motor vehicles that are driving on the highway. So who's getting subsidized? I think the public transportation is getting subsidized. And I thought I was quite reasonable when I said, if it's 50% fare box recovery, we're still going to cover 50% with those of us paying the gas tax and the registration. So thank you.
Well, Charles, that is dangerously close to debate, but I guess I'll have to allow it since you already said it. So we're going to move on. Thank you, Delegate Polakovich-Carr. Thank you, everybody who testified in favor of the bill. Lots of people are signed up in favor, and I believe nobody is signed up in opposition. So let's go to House Bill 322, Delegate Hill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon.
And you've got 2 minutes, 2 and 2.
Yep, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chair Stein and committee members, and I can share my screen if that's possible. Is that possible? Never mind. Consider it done. Okay, so I'm reintroducing HB 322, which is an exact duplicate of last session's HB 279, which passed out of this committee 29-3 and out of the House floor 133-2. It died over in the Senate, because we couldn't get out. We lost 3 weeks. And this bill essentially does a couple of things. It applies to landscaping techniques that we call sustainable, and they're sustainable because they conserve water, they lower maintenance costs, they provide pollution prevention, create habitat for wildlife. And what this bill does, it prohibits condominium or homeowners association from imposing unreasonable restrictions on low impact landscaping that the homeowner wishes to install. And unreasonable is that which significantly increases the landscaping costs, decreases the landscaping efficiency, or requires turf grass. This bill does not prohibit reasonable design and aesthetic guidelines. It does not apply to listed or inclusion eligible historic properties. I'm just going to ask that you do the same as before. And as last year, we also have no opposition, and we have the support of the Community Association Institute, which is the voice of the Maryland Community Association homeowners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate. Any questions for the sponsor? Okay, seeing none, we have the following people signed up in favor: Janet Crouch, Sarah Villa, Mark Sutherland, Nancy Lawson. So let's start with Janet Crouch. Janet, are you there?
I am here.
Okay,
Good afternoon.
welcome, and you've got 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My family has spent the last 3 years in a legal battle to save our pollinator garden and fight for our property rights. We've lived in Beech Creek, a Columbia outparcel, not part of Columbia Association, since 1999, and have nurtured an environmentally friendly garden since approximately 2004. Our garden's footprint had been in place for over a decade when the Beech Creek HOA hired law firm sent us a cease and desist letter demanding that we replace our entire garden with grass in 2017. After nearly 2 years of living under the threat of having our garden destroyed, we filed suit against the Beech Creek HOA in August 2019. In bullying letters and court documents, the HOA's lawyer wrote that gardens with plants that help birds, butterflies, and other pollinators do not belong in our community or in any planned community. Even though we pointed out that this was untrue and that the nearby Columbia Association promotes eco-friendly pollinator gardening and that such gardens are found throughout Columbia, the Beech Creek HOA dismissed us and required that our garden be replaced with grass. Through our lawsuit, we learned that this all started because of the complaint of one neighbor. The HOA had ignored him until he began improperly using a high-level .gov email address and his title in communications pushing for replacement of our garden with turf grass. After 3 long years and over $60,000, we recently settled our case and are able to retain most of our garden with some setbacks. The HOA spent well over $75,000 on attorney fees in this matter without even making the community aware of their activities. The bottom line is that this should have never happened. Passing this protective legislation would help ensure that other homeowners who are just trying to do the right thing are able to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go next to Sarah Villa. Did I pronounce your name correctly? You're muted, Sarah. The mute button is in the lower.
I moved it off the screen, sorry. Okay, yeah, hi. My last name is actually pronounced Via, but that's okay. I'm Sarah Via. I'm a professor at University of Maryland, College Park, and I'm very pleased to testify in favor of this bill. The bill concerns essentially whether HOAs can require their residents to landscape their own yards in ways that are known to be environmentally damaging, that pollute our air and water, that leave chemical residues on landscapes that are harmful to children and pets, and that contribute to critical losses of biodiversity. So we're in the middle of what scientists call the 6th great extinction, which is right up there with the giant meteorite that hit the earth and caused the death of the dinosaurs. But this time humans are the cause, and our landscaping practices are one of the big culprits. Just this past week, the proceeding of the National Academy of Sciences, which is like our premier science journal in the country, published 11 articles on the critical decline of insect species. Now, most people might say, oh, insect species going extinct, good riddance. But insects are out there doing all kinds of jobs for us every day that are absolutely essential. And we need those insects to pollinate our crops and do a lot of other services. So one of the articles in this issue is called 8 Ways That People Can Rebuild Biodiversity. So 8 ways. Way number 1, reduce the amount of lawn on your property, even by just 10%. Way number 2, plant native plants. So the National Academy of Sciences is coming out in favor of allowing people to do exactly what this bill is proposing. Let's talk about lawn. 1.3 million acres in Maryland, exact same number of acres as cropland. We get a lot out of our cropland. What do we get from lawn? Pretty much nothing. How about the landscapes that people want to install in place of their lawn? Mostly native plants. I've seen Miss Crouch's landscape, very beautiful, absolutely great. A number of people have a misconception about these landscapes, that they're going to look like a weedy vacant lot. They don't, they're beautiful. The people who want to install these are highly motivated and know what they're talking about. And I would really like this committee to support environmentally conscious residents of Maryland who want to do the right thing and improve the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Mark Sutherland. Mark, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you see me?
go for it. We can hear you and see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Barve, Vice Chair Stein, and members of the committee, and also a special thanks to Delegates Hill and Feldmark for sponsoring this important legislation. I'm Mark Sutherland. I represent Safe Skies Maryland, which is a regional group focused on birds, wildlife, and the humans that they interact with. As we all know, Maryland has been spending millions of dollars to protect the bay and to reduce the runoff from stormwater and from our yards and other properties. What most people don't know is that the stormwater controls that are needed cannot only be done on public property, but must also be done on private property to meet those requirements. The good news is there's a growing constituency of private landowners, renters, other property owners who are ready and willing to do their part. The bad news is that there are still some communities and HOAs that are prohibiting these private landowners from doing that on their properties, i.e. low impact landscaping, rain gardens, pollinator gardens, native landscaping. So this is really important because as Dr. Vaya has just said, it's critical to our ecosystem. I have lots of statistics in my written testimony, but just suffice it to say that if we allow low impact landscaping on the private properties that want to do it, we will help keep the bay healthy, reduce stormwater runoff, fight climate change by making soils healthier and sequestering carbon, support pollinator friendly birds and insects, and improve our gardens, increase fruit harvest, improve air quality by increased planting of trees and other vegetation. So with that, if Maryland passes this bill, it will remove unnecessary community and HOA restrictions, empower the ready citizen movement to improve their communities, restore the environment, revitalize the economy, and fight climate change. So with that, I thank you and hope for your favorable report.
Thank you very much. Final witness, Nancy Lawson. Nancy, you out there?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. As a native plant consultant, I advise homeowners on the benefits and techniques of pollinator gardening. So it was quite a surprise when my sister's HOA took the regressive step of demanding that her pollinator garden be converted to turf grass. We successfully argued to save most of the garden, but the experience crystallized some common myths that I'd like to dispel. Myth number one is that native plant gardens decrease property values. In reality, they're a hot selling point. Top real estate agents report that homeowners actually seek properties landscaped to mitigate stormwater runoff and attract pollinators. In fact, the New York Times Sunday real estate section featured my own Maryland native plant garden as an example of a beautiful landscape on its front page. Myth number two is that native plants are unruly or wild. In reality, they come in all shapes, colors, and sizes. They can fit beautifully into any neighborhood and even look like they belong there. And that's no coincidence because our hometown plants are accustomed to our soils and our climate. Maryland native plants can fit into any design aesthetic, from a cottage garden to a Japanese garden. And myth number three is that pollinator gardens are dangerous because bees sting. In reality, Maryland's native bees generally don't sting at all. Honeybees are an imported species raised in hives, and when they're flying right near those hives, they're instinctively protective. But Maryland's 400 plus native bee species are mostly solitary nesters with no hives to defend, and thus no reason to sting. Myth number four is that native plant gardens attract pests such as mosquitoes and ticks. In reality, they create more balance, especially when allowed throughout a whole community. They attract mosquito predators such as hummingbirds, and they provide habitat for tick predators like opossums. Studies show a single opossum can actually consume more than 5,000 ticks in 1 week. So those are just a few of the reasons. I hope you'll consider continuing to support this important legislation.
Well, thank you so much for ticking off those points. Questions for the witnesses. Delegate Otto goes.
Thank you. Is there provisions for controlling noxious weeds? And is there a list of the species that are approved for these pollinator projects? Don't get me wrong, I'm not against them, but I do have concerns about things that are good for pollinators can be obnoxious and noxious and invasive, like honeysuckle and things like that. So is there provisions to control those things?
Who'd like to take a crack at that?
I can answer. There is another bill up for consideration this year to prohibit state funding of invasive plants. And that's based for public projects, and that's based on a lot of the information that's already on the Maryland DNR and Maryland Ag websites about invasive plants and noxious weeds. And I know in Howard County, we do also have lists of plants that are not recommended for both public projects and private home ownership.
You good, Charles?
Was there provisions to control other weeds that are come up in those kind of projects? I know what nutsedge will do, and I can imagine how that would proliferate in something that's left undisturbed, and the favorable vegetation doesn't well, it gets choked out basically.
Actually, nutsedge, so that is a plant that comes up a lot in disturbed environments. But once you get native plant ground covers going, they actually crowd out those invasives. They're very robust at helping to keep down the weeds once you get them going, which I'm a member of the Howard County Bee City campaign as well. And we have a lot of recommendations along those lines. I know other counties do too, to try to help people maintain in a way that is going to prevent takeover by those types of plants.
Okay, Delegate Jacobs had his hand up.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, thank you. My question is about municipalities with ordinances that have 12-inch grass ordinances in place. Where would this align itself with municipalities with that sort of ordinance? Somebody want to take a crack at that?
Well, I will. I would guess that most people who are going to take advantage of this will be planting beds of mostly flowering native plants, some native grasses, but many native grasses are like bunch grasses, and they're grown as ornamentals, and they're really quite beautiful. So I don't think that any of these beds would be mistaken for a sort of abandoned lawn that had grown in excess of 12 inches, because it's really quite a different look. It's not trying to look like a lawn.
Right, but the comment came up earlier in testimony about some of it looked like an abandoned lot, and
oh, that was my testimony, and what I was trying to say was that is a myth. A lot of people think that a native planting is going to look really unruly. It's going to be filled with weeds. That is a total myth. Those
okay, well, I just
do not look like that.
And I'm believe me, I'm not opposed to this. I'm playing devil's advocate because I do know that municipalities in many parts of the state have 12-inch ordinances for the height of grass. So just want to make certain that this is not going to interfere with any of those ordinances, or maybe there would have to be an exception made. I don't know, one or the other, but just something to think about. Thank you.
Delegate Harris.
Hi, good afternoon. I don't remember who was the homeowner who testified first. I don't remember the name, but my question is
Janet. It was Janet Crouch.
Crouch. Okay, Miss Crouch. My question to Miss Crouch is for your particular garden, is it in the front yard or in the backyard?
It's in the front yard, and
okay.
It has been there for now about 15 years.
Okay.
With no issues.
Right. So then I guess the homeowner who may have made the complaint then was probably citing perhaps something that was in your contract, in your homeowners association contract. Is there something in your homeowners association contract that says how you must keep your front yard? And does this go against it?
So there's nothing that says you have to have grass. What they used was something that they've never, they said it was an unapproved change. And no one in our community has ever requested approval for their garden. And in fact, there are numerous other gardens as well as native plant gardens in our community. But they just decided to come after us because of the one neighbor who had never said anything. No one ever said anything to us in all these years.
So you have other homeowners there who have something similar, but it's just you, and so therefore the delegates put in this particular legislation to make sure that no one else has such an issue.
Exactly, and I believe there are I've talked to other homeowners since I've been in this situation who have been watching our struggle and who've come to me for advice and help, who were dealing with the same thing with their HOAs. So it's not a lone case.
Okay, and then the final question then goes back to Delegate Jacob, similar to Delegate Jacob's question. So in your garden, then, do you have any of those grasses that may go in such a garden that are higher than 12 inches?
Actually, we don't have grasses in our garden. We have plants, and we weed out any invasives that come in. I would say that our neighbors have more invasive, troublesome plants than we do. Actually, the one who complained has a Japanese barberry plants in his yard that have been banned for planting in Howard County since 2010 in new developments because they attract ticks and mice that carry Lyme. So there are no prohibition against that for his yard, and yet we have to get rid of the positive beneficial plants in our yard. So
okay, thank you.
Any other questions for any of the witnesses? Delegate Holmes. You need to unmute yourself, Marvin.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I had the screen in full screen, had to reduce it. I just wanted to go back to Delegate Harrison's concern. And the bill specifically indicates that restriction on the use does not include those with bylaws or on condominiums or homeowners associations. That's all, Mr. Chair.
All righty then. Any further questions for this bill that has no opponents and which last year? Seeing none, thank you very much. Thank you, Delegate Hill. That concludes the public hearing on House Bill 322. We'll proceed to House Bill 352, whose bill was delayed by all these questions. Could it be Delegate Holmes?
It probably was. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We have before us House Bill 352. If this bill sounds familiar to you, that's because it is along a familiar theme across these first bills that we are hearing. HB 352 was a file of HB 1053 of last year, relevant to governing bodies and annual meetings, etc. So this bill allows, one part of the bill allows for a board of directors when a subdivision is under the control of the declarant, the developer, to have 2 meetings annually as opposed to just one, which is in the current law. The other thing that this bill does is it requires that the declarant notify the board of directors, or once the subdivision is turned over to the citizens, notify the board of directors of any bonds that are outstanding. Now, I do know that some of my friends on the building industry may have a little bit of concern about particularly that part of the bill, which is notifying the homeowners of the bonding. But it is what I am trying to do with this legislation is simply to notify those that are going to be owning this property and being on the governing board, that there are bonds in place. I do recognize that when a property is when a subdivision is bonded, that the homeowners have no ability to interfere or react to that bond. I am simply attempting to notify the homeowners that there is a bond in place. That's it. And with that, Mr. Chair, since we've all heard this bill before, I will end my testimony right there.
All righty then. Any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, we'll proceed to the witnesses. We have Dave Humpton and Karen Strawn signed up in favor, and then after them, we have Bob Enton and Lori Graff favorable with amendments. Let's start with Dave Humpton. Dave, you there? Former city manager of Gaithersburg, Maryland, Dave Humpton. Is he there? Apparently not. Okay, we'll go to Karen Strawn. Karen, I did see you, so somewhere there. So,
Yes, I'm here.
okay, terrific. Welcome back to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Karen Strawn, and I'm here to testify on HB 352, which is a bill that is set up to give a little bit more knowledge and control to the community when it's still under developer control. The problem that we have right now is that there are very few laws or regulations that apply to developers while it is under their control. And so the community often has no knowledge of what's happening and no knowledge of what they can do to try and better their association. It also causes problems when they go to transfer control because they have to set up a whole new board at that point and they don't have anybody who has any historical knowledge. This bill would do four main things. It would, first of all, require that they have 2 annual meetings so that the community members can come and listen and find out what's going on. It would require that once they reach 25% of the properties that are conveyed, that they would put one person on the board who is not affiliated with the developer and is a member of the community, so that they can report back to community members about what's happening. The third thing it would do is it would provide notice of bonds. Oftentimes in a community, the streets and roads are covered by a bond. Sometimes the lights are covered by a bond. And we get complaints that the bonds have been released and the roads are not done. And unfortunately, because it's not a statutory matter, there's nothing we can do to help. So this would provide a source of knowing that they're going to be asking to release the bonds before they get released so that individuals can challenge that. And finally, it would require that there be no commingling of funds between association accounts and the developer's money, so that when the money gets transferred to the community, it's actually what belongs to the community. So for those reasons, we ask that you provide a favorable report on this bill.
Okay, thank you very much. Dave, you around, Dave Humpton?
Good afternoon, Chairman Barve and members of the committee. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can. Yes, we can.
Good to see you all. I'm Dave Humpton, Executive Vice President of the Montgomery Village Foundation, which is one of the largest homes corporations in the state of Maryland, representing over 40,000 members and 12,000 homes in 23 communities. We are happy to support this legislation just as we have in the past. In particular, we do believe that the bonding provision does make sense. This has been somewhat, I guess, controversial to some in the past, but again, in the good sense of full disclosure and for the homeowners having responsibility for future assets, we do think it is important that they're at least notified of the bonding requirements. We ask the committee to look favorably on this bill. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, we'll proceed to the people who are signed up favorable with amendments. Bob Enton and Lori Graff. Let's take Bob first since he's signed up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Robert Enton on behalf of the Maryland Building Industry Association. We are signed up favorable with amendments. Ms. Graff and I, she's the president of the association, have reviewed this bill with Delegate Holmes, as he mentioned. Our concerns with some of the bill I think are just more technical than they are substantive. We have some concerns on page 5 and line 16, just to make it clear For instance, whether the 25% mentioned there applies to the whole community and the number of units that may ultimately be annexed, or whether it only applies after the entire community has been expanded to include all phases. So I think that's just a technical, just a wording issue that should be addressed. Of more concern to us is the language regarding the bonding. And I discussed this at length with Delegate Holmes, and I think he appreciates our concern, and we look forward to working this out with him. The language says you have to furnish the name, address, and phone number of the person through which a claim against the bond may be asserted. So let's be clear about this. These bonds run in favor of the municipality. Typically, they deal with the public parts of the property where the road may go in and go through the property. They're not the common areas, and those bonds are in favor of the municipality that's undertaking the construction on the property site. So what we don't want to do is to create an impression amongst homeowners that they have the right to make a claim against the bond. That bond runs totally in favor of the political subdivision that's expending funds, and it's something that they can make a claim against. I think while we're not sure about the value of the entire section, at a minimum, I think that what we would ask for is, if you want to give the name, address, and phone number of the person holding the bond, that's fine. But we don't want to have any confusion and have consumers or residents think that they have the right to make a claim. That's not how things work. And I think Delegate Holmes understands that, and I feel certain we can work it out. Thank you.
Okay. Next, Lori Graff. Lori, welcome back to the committee.
Hello, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I don't really have too much else to add. We submitted our testimony. We were here last year on the same issue. We just have some concerns. Again, as Mr. Enton stated, these are bonds that are not for things that the community will be owning. They're public land or public roads. So they are through the jurisdiction and the developer. Again, I don't know that we have a problem with disclosing, but we don't want the confusion that a claim can be put against it by the community, because that is not the case. So with that, we just ask for some amendments, and then we would support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for these two witnesses? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. One person is signed up in opposition. First of all, a couple of other people are signed up with written support for the bill. One person is signed up in opposition, Joseph Conwell, but he doesn't want to speak and doesn't have any written testimony. So that concludes the public hearing on House Bill 352. Let's proceed to House Bill 367. Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 367, pardon me, House Bill 367, ladies and gentlemen, again, will sound familiar. It is a bill that was presented to you last year as well. As a matter of fact, this bill has been presented 2013, 14, 17, 18, 19, and 20, and 21. I'm just saying that to let everyone know I am not giving up. This bill is a bill which is to require licensing for community. This bill has been presented.
Okay, you know what? I don't know who's interrupting the sponsor. Please stop that. Delegate Holmes, you have the floor.
This bill, what this bill does, it requires licensure for community managers. And community managers are those persons that manage HOAs, common ownership communities, like condos and other kind of common ownership communities. This bill requires licensure because currently, unlike other states within the United States, in order to be a manager, property manager in the state of Maryland, that manage, you only need one thing. And what is required thus far to be a community manager in the state of Maryland is as follows. Go to Staples, get a business card, print it up, and on that business card, have it say property manager. That's it. And because the requirements are so lax within the state of Maryland, there have been many cases of which perhaps Ms. Strawn might expand upon in her testimony. There have been many cases where property managers have absconded with millions, plural, of dollars. At least with licensure, there is a requirement that if someone does something, some type of misdeed, their licensing can be revoked or suspended, and perhaps some type of imprisonment can take place with intentional misuse of other person's money. There are many, many property managers within the state of Maryland, and quite frankly, we don't yet have a firm idea on how many of them there are. But we do know that there are certain criteria that should be met when getting a licensure for a community manager or property manager. And what I have done is I have patterned the licensure requirement in this bill after certifications from CAI, Community Association Institute. CAI has a program for community managers. And I know their requirements for CAI from CAI because I am certified with CAI as a community manager. I have taken the classes and I have taken the exam.
Delegate, stop. All right. I'm going to say this again. If anyone interrupts another speaker, I will have them removed from the Zoom by the manager. Proceed, Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chair. So I am very familiar with the requirements of, licensure as indicated in this legislation, because I have gone through the process.
Okay. I think your 4 minutes are up here.
That's good. That's fine.
Okay.
And with that, Mr. Chair, like I said earlier, we've gone through this bill before many years, and I'm looking forward to a favorable response this year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Signed up for written favorable testimony only is Karen Strawn, Susan Mitchell. Signed up in opposition is Arthur Johnson. Arthur, you have 2 minutes. Mr. Johnson. Chair. Okay, signed up. You need to unmute yourself, sir. Up in opposition is Arthur Johnson. Arthur, you have 2 minutes.
I'm Arthur Johnson. Can you hear me? I'm having trouble here.
Yes.
I'm Arthur Johnson, president of the Foxwell Farm Cluster Home Association in Baltimore County.
Signed up.
We are requesting that HB 360.
Unmute yourself, sir. Arthur, if you could hold on for 1 second. Trish, I heard my voice repeated.
Yeah, he's playing the YouTube video in the background as he's testifying.
Arthur Johnson, president of the Foxwell Farm Cluster Home Association in Baltimore County. We are requesting that HB 360.
Unmute yourself, sir.
It continues to mute.
Arthur, if you could hold on for 1 second.
Okay.
Trish, I heard my voice. Arthur, have you turned off YouTube?
The YouTube video in the background as he's testifying.
Arthur Johnson, president of the Foxwell Farm Cluster Home Association. What should I do?
Turn off YouTube.
We are requesting that HB 360. I apologize.
Arthur, if you could hold on for 1 second.
Okay.
Trish, I heard my voice. Arthur, have you turned off YouTube?
YouTube video in the background.
How do I do that? What should I do?
Turn off YouTube.
Yeah.
Close the window for your YouTube video that you're watching of the live stream. I think he accidentally left the meeting. If you want to do questions and maybe announcements, maybe he'll be back in the waiting room.
Sure. Any questions for the sponsor? Well, apparently not. Also signed up against, although written, Joseph Conwell and John Kruger, and that's it. Arthur, you back? Because if you're not, we're going to move on to the next bill. Okay, that's it for House Bill 367. We'll proceed to House Bill 399, Delegate Krim.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This is a reintroduction of a bill I did last year that passed your committee, passed the full House, and then went to the Senate and ended up in not passing because of the early dismissal. I do want to thank Chairman Marvin Holmes because he did lots of work on this bill. And we got it into a posture where all the stakeholders agreed. So what this bill does is that it states that if a property is located within a zone of dewatering influence and is designated for sale, then the vendor of the property must provide notice to a purchaser that the property is located within the zone before entering into a contract. The text of the notice is stated in the bill. If the notice is not received by the purchaser, then the purchaser has the right to rescind the contract. The Maryland Department of the Environment designated zones of dewatering influence in 2001. Those areas are where sinkholes occur or may occur as a result of quarry activity. Why this is important to us in Frederick County is that we have karst terrain and we have quarries, and on occasion, sinkholes do develop as a result. There are approximately 135 properties in the city of Frederick within the zone of dewatering influence. Since the designation of the zone, 114 of these have transferred ownership at least once. No disclosure of the zone to a potential purchaser is required at this time until we pass this legislation. There are for a residential property, standard homeowner insurance doesn't cover sinkholes, but there are policies where you can purchase sinkhole insurance. However, if you do not know that you need this protection, you do not purchase the policy that has sinkhole insurance. And so as a result, if a sinkhole develops and your property is damaged, you have no right to recovery. There have been several sinkholes in Frederick County. On September 11, 2018, an entire house, thankfully unoccupied, collapsed into a sinkhole in a zone of dewatering influence. The house next door has been condemned and will be demolished, and I think it is demolished by now due to structural damage from the sinkhole. The home on the other side is being tested for at the expense of the landlord owner, which is Habitat for Humanity, who holds the land in a perpetual affordable housing trust. The home that collapsed had no sinkhole insurance. The house next door, which has since been demolished and where the owner lived her entire life, had, by luck, had insurance. Not by choice, just by luck. Her agent told her, you might want to purchase this insurance. So she did. And as a result, she did not suffer the catastrophic financial issues that somebody with no insurance would have suffered. So what this bill is going to do is tell people who are selling property and are in a zone of dewatering influence at Frederick County, Carroll County, Washington County, or Baltimore County.
Delegate, if you could wrap up then. Okay,
I will wrap up.
Okay.
Chairman, I am wrapped up.
Okay, well, stick around though. I don't want you going anyplace. We have now this is a bill, delegate, that is identical to the bill from last year, correct?
Yes, it is. It was put back in the posture that it left your committee.
Okay, and before I recognize questions for the sponsors, I will remind everyone that no one has signed up against this bill, and it passed its committee last year.
Correct.
I see. Trish, can you tell me who put their hand up first, Mary or Will? Can you tell? Well,
Delegate Wyville was first up.
okay, Delegate Wyville, then Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Krim, just a quick question. I do support the bill, but I noticed NAOP has asked for an amendment that it would apply only to residential contracts of sale. Do you have an opinion on that?
Are you talking about the realtors? Is that the realtors who have?
No, it's the NAOP, Association for Commercial and Real Estate.
I am unsure what their amendment is. Does it have to do with underlining and putting the notice in bold? I know.
No, they're just asking, well, it's, yeah, I guess residential is underlined.
Right. Okay, so I've heard of an amendment that a stakeholder wants where I think what came from your committee last year, that the notice would be both bold and underline. They would like one or the other. They have agreed to the bold. So I'm going to follow the will of the committee, but I have no objection to that, but I will follow the will of the committee on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Delegate Lehman.
Thank you. And thank you, Delegate Krim. This is an interesting bill. I do remember it from last year. There are obviously sinkholes all around the state of Maryland. I know I have a number of them. I dealt with a number of them in my district when I was on the Prince George's County Council. So I was just curious whether there's any reason why you're approaching this just from a 4-county sort of standpoint, so not local, but not statewide. Why did you not go with a statewide bill?
I think we're confining our request to the areas of karst terrain where sinkholes do develop as a result of quarry activity. And they're identified on the MDE website. So Delegate, if Prince George's is identified on the MDE website as having areas of dewatering influence, then you certainly can amend your county on. We're just trying to follow MDE on this.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't believe it is, because I remember asking about this last year. It's a different problem. So at least the cases I dealt with often had to do with abandoned wells and other infrastructure. And I learned that there's actually a state law to address how to properly, quote unquote, abandon a well from an engineering standpoint. But what would happen was that WSSC was often asked to come and look. And as long as it wasn't in a right of way, if it was on the homeowner's private property, it was their problem. And as you said, often homeowners insurance policies don't
cover that.
These problems, and then it's cost prohibitive. People can't afford to address that. So thank you for for the bill, and I'm going to follow up and look at it for my 2 counties, for Anne Arundel and Prince George's. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there appear to be no further questions for the sponsor. The following people are signed up in favor of the bill: Kelly Russell, Jennifer Nelson, Tracy Coleman, Lisa May, Carol Smith. So let's start with Kelly Russell. Kelly, welcome to the committee.
So much, Chairman Barve. Happy to have the opportunity to speak in support of House Bill 399. I could take a hint: when there's no opposition, you don't need lengthy testimony. I will mention that the zones of influence are designated in those 4 counties based on the Maryland Code Environment 15813, which talks about approximate cause of sinkholes due to quarrying activity. I just also would like to add that the city of Frederick, in the interim between last session and this, did take it upon itself to identify each of the properties in the city of Frederick in that zone. We sent a letter in conjunction with MDE. I'd like to thank Molly Michelson, a program manager with MDE, who made sure our letters were accurate, notifying these property owners that they were in a zone of influence. And we support this legislation so that any future property owner going forward will know what they're getting into so they can make an informed choice. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Jennifer Nelson.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am the homeowner next door that was affected by the sinkhole. So I'm not the house that had the sinkhole underneath of it. I'm the next door neighbor. Our house has been since demolished. It was demolished in November of 2020. I'm very grateful and in full support of House Bill 399. I am extremely grateful for my insurance agent to have offered and suggested to have this insurance rider on my policy. If not, I can't imagine where my family and I would be at this time. I don't have any idea, any inkling where we would be. It has been a financial burden and a stress because insurance doesn't pay for everything when you go through a homeowner's insurance claim. We are still financially, struggling with helping. We are funding the estate next door to continue the litigation process with that property. So my husband and I are providing the full financial support of that property by paying a mortgage payment where there's no house. So if that house would have had insurance, potentially that home could have been paid off. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer, but thank you for your time and effort to inform others and hopefully, give them the right to choose whether or not, they want to purchase a property inside that zone. And if they do, let them know that, hey, go purchase insurance to protect yourself, just in case. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, we feel really sorry about the situation you've been left with. Next, Tracy Coleman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm the Deputy Director of the Department of Public Works here in the city of Frederick. I just want to reiterate what Alderman Russell said and what Jennifer said as well. It's important that those planning to purchase a property have information available and provided to them about the property they intend to purchase, especially if that information could allow them to understand potential issues that may arise from living in a particular environment, like an area in karst terrain or within a zone of dewatering influence. This will allow them to make an informed decision about the property, and if they choose to purchase the property, they'll have the information necessary to prepare for any issues that may arise. And that's all I have. Thank you again.
Well, thank you very much. Lisa May, I see you there someplace. There you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lisa May, I'm representing the Maryland Realtors. As Delegate Krim mentioned, she worked very closely with us and other stakeholders during the last General Assembly session on this bill. The language that is in HB 399 mirrors other disclosures that are given to potential buyers in the residential contract for sale. And by having the dewatering zone maps available on the MDE website, this allows potential buyers to do their due diligence without also unnecessarily holding up a home offer or a home purchase. So for these reasons, we recommend a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the final witness is Carol Smith. Carol? Okay.
She's my staff, so I'm sure that was an error.
Oh, all right. Questions for the witnesses? Any questions? Well, I don't see any questions. And of course, there was an amendment offered by Tom Ballantyne with NAIOP, so we'll definitely look into that. Okay, this concludes the public hearing on House Bill 399. Thank you very much. Announcements. Do any of the subcommittee chairs have any announcements? Delegate Gilchrist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Natural Resources and Ag, we have 4 bills to look at this afternoon.
What time you meet?
Let's meet at 3 o'clock.
Okay.
3 o'clock, everybody, that good?
Okay, any other announcements? Yes, Delegate Learman.
Land use is not meeting this afternoon, so
Oh, look who's trying to suck up to her subcommittee.
we're all free to go, enjoy the sunshine.
Okay, any other announcements by anyone for the good of the order? If not, that concludes the public hearing for this day. Thank you. Have a great evening.